I appreciate Mike's selection of songs. I guess you did this on purpose. Every song had something to do with the stars. We sing about the stars, don't we? And today I'm going to preach about the stars. My mother said, well, what are you going to preach about that? I said, well, how God made them. Well, all you're going to say is say he made them, then what? So I'll get into that as we go into this lesson. But there is a lot in the Bible about the stars. If you look at the bulletin, it starts with the fable. You know, Lancelot, the great knight, he's just riding his horse coming out of Camelot and looking up at the night sky, and he sees a star. And, you know, he's just he wonders what it is. But have you ever done that? Think back to your childhood. You ever wonder about the stars, seeing up in the sky? What did you think? You know, for many years, men didn't have any idea what we were looking at when we looked at the stars. They look kind of small to us. But you know, there are stars that are so large that there are stars that are so large, Mars could orbit inside those stars if it was a hollow ball. That just is beyond our imagination, things that huge. People thought the stars spun around the earth. And they thought the sun would, you know, we still talk about how the sun rises and sets. Well, that's the way it looks. And then later, they got to thinking, wait a minute, that's not what's happening. The earth is actually spinning around, and the sun is standing still. Well, that's what they thought. But then they figured out, you know, it was Galileo. He was looking at Jupiter through a telescope that he made, and he saw that the moons of Jupiter were going around Jupiter. He thought, you know, that's what's happening to the earth. It's going around the sun. The sun isn't going around the earth. The earth is going around the sun. Well, they just couldn't hardly accept that. That was such a change in how we looked at the universe. And then come to find out the sun really isn't standing still. It is traveling through space at speeds unimaginable and dragging all these planets with it. And it is going around the center of our galaxy. You know what a galaxy is? Well, it's a group of stars that are all spinning around together. And then the number of stars in our galaxy, as we looked in the telescope and pointed in the sky, we just see a few of the stars. There are so many. It just seems like it's countless stars in our galaxy. But everything we look at was not a star. Well, a long time ago, they thought the planets, they were wandering stars. The stars seemed fixed in the sky. And then these planets, they weren't fixed. They were moving around. Well, now we figured out, well, they're planets. They're not stars. But all of them aren't planets. Some of them are beyond our galaxy. And they zeroed in. There are now more galaxies than we can count. And if there's more stars in our galaxy than we can count, and there's more galaxies than we can count, how many stars are there? They will tell us, oh, it's very easy. There's more stars in the sky than there is. There are particles of sand along the shores of the sea. Now that makes my mind, I can't grasp that. And we sing that song, how great thou art, when I see the stars. The more we come to look up in the night sky and get the comprehension of what our universe really is, the more astounding it becomes. The stars. And yet you're reading in the book of Genesis chapter 1, what he made the first day, the second day, and then you come, he set the sun in the sky for light by day and the moon for the light by night. Then it says this, what's up on the board in verse 16. Well, he made the stars also. It's almost as though in passing. Oh, yeah, he did that too. I mean, what kind of God do we have? They can just say something about as magnificent as all the stars. Oh, yeah, he did that too. He made the stars also. Well, we know God made the stars. I want to talk about why did he do it? Why did God make the stars? And we may not know all of the reasons why, but the Bible tells us some of the reasons why God made the stars. And some of these are very deeply spiritual reasons. Now, some of them are real practical. Now you know this. Why did he set the sun and moon and stars in the sky? Well, that's where we get our light, isn't it? Well, we understand that. And that's what it says in Genesis 1:14 and 15. God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. And so we understand that there's lights. Wouldn't it be awful if there weren't lights in the sky? If we just lived in darkness? Even in the night sky, if we just looked out and it's just nothing in the night, just blackness. I've seen nights that look like that because of cloud covers that come in or something, and it's just, you look, all you see is blackness. It's not a very good thing to look at. Oh, those clear nights when you look up and see those stars, they're so beautiful. I'm so glad they're out there just for that. There's lights in the sky. But then he also says this, let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Well, we count time by what we see in the sky. You know what the day is? It talks about it in the Genesis 1, the evening and the morning, the first day. Well, the sun defines our day. You know, a month is right at 30 days. I know we vary our months to match it up with the year. So we got some 29 to 31 days, but that's about like the cycle of the moon. It's the moon that gave us the idea of our months. As the moon waxes and wanes, it's about once a month when it does that, though we don't have it lined out exactly in line with the moon. There were times calendars did that. They were defined by the moon. The lunar year, they called it. But then the stars beyond, that defines our seasons. I don't know if you've ever looked at the night sky, but the night sky you look at in winter is not the night sky you look at in the summer. As the earth moves around the sun, we're seeing different parts of the sky at night. The sun shines and because everything turns this beautiful blue, it blocks out the stars, and we don't see the stars during that time. If in the summertime, during an eclipse, when the sun is blocked out, you look up in a winter sky. It's because that's where the sun is blocking that now. But then it keeps moving about. And so that's for the seasons and the years determined by the position of the stars. The stars you see tonight will not rise and set as they do tonight until another year. But a year later, that pattern, that will be repeated just like that. Otherwise, they move just a little bit or appear to that until we make that whole circuit around that sun. Well, God did that so that we could use the sky to determine our time. So why did God create the stars? Well, we've got two reasons here. But the reason I'm bringing this sermon today, I thought it'd be appropriate. Did you know today is the winter solstice? Now let me tell you what that means. We'll call it this. It's the shortest day of the year. Now yesterday was the 20th. 9 hours and 44 minutes and 29 seconds. I got on my computer and said, okay, if you're in Warren County, how long is the day yesterday? And That's what it comes up. And today, it's going to be 1 second shorter. This is the hours of daylight. And then tomorrow is going to be 2 seconds longer. Today, we have the shortest day of the year. From now on, the days are going to get longer until we get to the summer solstice. Then they'll start getting shorter again. It comes back to the winter solstice. And that's how we determine when winter begins. See how we're using that for time. Well, I thought that was interesting. In fact, here's how precise it was. I wasn't able to get the seconds, but I got it down to the minutes. In Warren County today, winter begins at 9:03 a.m. Winter has just begun. But that is at that point where the days quit getting shorter and they start getting longer, right at 9:03. And so that's when winter begins. Well, why would you even mention that in a sermon? I tell you, here's why. They knew that's when winter would begin. Because all of these objects in the sky operate by laws that do not change, that we can count on. And the fact that there's laws that run this universe tell us what? There's a lawgiver. Where people talk about, well, where did matter come from? Where did energy come from? Well, let me ask this. Where do the laws come from? There's a lawgiver. There has to be a lawgiver for everything to work this way. I was reading this week about some mathematician at Harvard that thinks he can mathematically prove that God exists because of the constants that we see in the creation. I believe he said there's about 20 of them. If any one of them were to vary just a tiny little bit, everything would fall apart. That's how precise things are in the physical world. And so at 9:03 today, that's what they said. And if they go back and check, they'll find out, yeah, it came out just like we said. And they know that because of the laws. The lawgiver is seen by those stars. So, why did God make the stars? Well, here's 2 reasons to start with. There's the light, and there are the times. But there's another reason, real practical reason. It's navigation. You read in the book of Acts about Paul's trip to Rome when the storm came up and they couldn't see. It was just those black skies we're talking about. For many days, it says, we exceedingly tossed with a tempest. We lighted the ship. The 3rd day, we cast out with our own hands the tackling. And it said there, when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared. After several days of being blown around in that sea, the currents carrying them, the wind blowing them, and after many days, they didn't know where they were. They surely saw it getting lighter and getting darker, but they didn't know where the sun was. They couldn't see it. And at night, they would navigate by the stars, and there's no stars. They're lost. The navigators had learned to use the stars to identify their position. You know you still do? You probably did it this week. You didn't know it. Do you ever use GPS? You ever look and say, okay, we'll type that address in GPS, and then they go by the road. You know how they know where you are? There's satellites out there that identify. I mean, it's a physical wonder, really, how men have figured this out. They got satellites up there and they know where they are, and from that they can tell where you are by the way the signal's cross-section. Do you know how they know where the satellites are? Every one of those satellites has a device in it, and they're different devices, but a device they call the star tracker. And it recognizes the patterns of the stars in the sky, and that's what holds that satellite in that place. If it deviates, it'll put itself back. When you're using GPS today, you're being guided by the stars. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, all the work's been done for you. I used to be a surveyor, and I they taught us, I never did this, but one of the things we had to learn when we were learning surveying is how to position yourself by the stars. You can set up an instrument, and then you can take your bearings, and you had these books where you could look at the stars and the times and check, and you could spot yourself on the earth at that one little spot by the stars with that survey equipment, and know where to begin that. Position yourself for that survey. I thought that was fascinating. People don't do that much now because of GPS, but the old days, that's what surveyors had to know how to do if they needed to establish a spot to begin with in their survey. So, the stars, they give us a position. So I'm going to put navigation on there. Isn't that wonderful? Stars are for light and for time, for navigation. But there's something else we've already alluded to. God put the stars in the sky to give us a glimpse of His glory. The heavens declare the glory of God. Psalm 19 and verse 1. You look at that starry sky, they're beautiful, aren't they? And realize how glorious, and then you see what a mighty universe it is and think what a mighty God we must have. And this verse calls it His handiwork. Y'all ever do any handiwork? I know some of you do, maybe quilting, or maybe it's painting, or some craft. And you do it, what? It's for your pleasure. You just enjoy your pleasure. It's God's pleasure. It's the work of His fingers. You want to see the handiwork of God. And you look out at that starry sky. It's a glimpse of His glory. Notice how this reads. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where His voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Now this is ancient Hebrew poetry. And so there's parallel lines here expressing a thought and then expressing the same thought in a little different words. But I also want you to notice this. Look at the there is and the where. And in the King James Version, those words are in italics. Now what that means is, that's not to emphasize the words, that means that those words were not in the Hebrew, and the translators are trying to, they'll put a few words in there sometime to help make the Hebrew flow. Sometimes it's good to read without the italics. Let me do it with this verse. I'm going to show you something that I think is fascinating. I'm going to put it in the parallel lines. Here it is. Heavens declare the glory of God, and the parallel, the firmament, well, that's the heavens, showeth His handiwork. So you see His handiwork and His glory in His handiwork, don't you? Next lines. Day unto day uttereth speech, and you see how day unto day, parallel. Night unto night showeth knowledge. But then the next without the supplied words. No speech. No language. Their voice is not heard. Now let me supply a word. Yet. And go to the next line. Yet. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Their line. Think of the lines of a play. Do you know your lines? You know, you've studied in Shakespeare. Do you know your lines for your play? Have you learned your lines? What is it? It's the message. They're telling us something. These stars are telling us something. And they're doing it without speech, without language, and no voice. But you get the message, don't you? The glory of God is seen all over this world. Whenever men look up into the stars. So without saying a word, we hear their word, we hear their message. That's the beauty of that psalm there. Psalm 8:1. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. Now look at this. Who has set thy glory above the heavens? Do you see the glory of God in the sky? When you do, remember it's more glorious than that. He has set his glory above the heavens. God is more glorious than all the stars in the sky, is what the psalmist is telling us. And when we think of how glorious that is, realize it's just a little peek. The glory of our God. That's astounding, isn't it? So there's a spiritual reason he put there. We're going to put glory on there. Number 4, there's another reason. You're probably already beginning to understand this before I even explain it, because it goes along with the glory of God. Those stars, they humble us. Listen to the words in Job 19, verses 1 through 10. He doesn't understand what's going on. God ought to show himself and explain this to me. But how can that be? How can man contend with God? How should man be just with God? If he will contend with him, he can answer him 1 in 1,000. He's wise in heart and mighty in strength, which alone, what did God do? He spreads out the heavens. He tread upon the waves of the sea, and then he mentions some constellations in the heavens, which made Arcturus, Orion, the Pleiades, the chambers of the south, which doeth great things past number, yea, wonders without number. Job is humbled. I know, I can't tell God. I couldn't get in a contest with him. Look what he's done in me. Who am I to question God? Is what Job is saying here. Look, Job 38, 31 through 33, God reminds Job of this. God does appear in the whirlwind to Job toward the end of the book. Look what God tells him. He said, Job, can you bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades? That's one of the little constellations in the sky. He says, can you loose the bands of Orion? You ever looked up and seen the belt of Orion? Those 3 stars in a line? Maybe get a star chart out sometime and look at them. They're fascinating. Can you loose his belt? It says, can thou bring forth the Mazzaroth in his season? There's not universal agreement here, but that Mazzaroth is the stars that define our seasons. One of the ways to look at that is the zodiac. Now, don't think we're talking about trying to, look at a horoscope, but the zodiac defines the seasons as the sun moves through the different constellations of the zodiac. And so the Mazzaroth, can you bring that forth in this season? Can you make those constellations rise when they're supposed to rise? It says, knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Do you understand how all this works? Job, you need to be humble. You need to be humble. Amos talks about this. In the book of Amos, chapter 5 and verse 8, seek him that made the 7 stars. That's the Pleiades. Now, you count them, it looks like they're so small you can't really count them. There's somewhere between 5 or 8 of them. They're often called the 7 stars. Did see him that made the 7 stars in Orion? The Lord is his name. Amos is telling that to Israel to humble them. You better pay attention to the Lord. Psalm 8, verses 3 through 4. When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers. See, it's his handiwork. The work of thy fingers. The moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. And here it is. What is man? That thou art mindful of him. Of the Son of Man that thou visitest him. The more you learn about the stars, the smaller you're going to feel. In fact, the earth is just so insignificant in this universe. And we're just so insignificant on the earth. Why would you visit us with all this universe before? What is man that you would visit us? I'll tell you who man is. Unlike the stars of the heavens, Man is made in the image of God. That's why God visited us. And we read this in Psalm 102, verses 25 through 28. Of old thou hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens, there they are again, the work of thy hands, but they shall perish. Every star you see in that sky is going to burn out. They all perish. But not God. But thou shalt endure. Yea, all of them shall wax old like a garment. As a vesture shalt thou change them, and they shall be changed, but thou art the same, and thy years have no end. And now he says this, the children of thy servants shall continue, and their seed shall be established before thee. I'll tell you something different between us and the stars. Every star is going to be gone, but you won't be. You're made in the image of God. Oh, the body of this flesh will perish, but you are a spirit that will live on beyond this universe. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth with new bodies, and we don't really grasp what all that means, but we know this, we endure when the stars burn out. Well, why did God make the stars? One of them is humility. We see His glory. We should be humble before the God that made these things. Now, in this season of the year, people talk about a special star that God made. Now, I know the Bible story gets confused in the what we call the Christmas season, and they have the wise men showing up at the manger the night Jesus is born. Well, now that's not what the Bible says, but people, you're going to hear a lot about the wise men following the star at this season of the year. Here's where the story comes from. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, so he's already born now. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we've seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding joy. Well, you'll have to read the whole story here. But what a mystery this is. Who were these wise men? Where is the east? How many were there? Were there three? Well, there's three gifts, so they talk about three wise men. Now, wait a minute. Where are the camels? Well, you don't know. It doesn't read here about the camels. Well, in another lesson, maybe I can explain maybe where the camels come from. But what is all of this? What are we reading about here? And a lot of it we really don't know. We're not even sure where they saw the star. Were they in the east when they saw the star? Well, I think they were. The word wise men's from the word Persia. A Persian word. It's a Greek word from a Persian word, and that's in the east, so maybe they came from Persia. But did they see the star? Was the star in the east? You know, that's where stars rise from the east. Did they see the star rise? Or were they in the east when they saw the star, and the star is in the west? Well, I mean, we can't really figure all that. The language isn't that precise to tell us. It doesn't matter. They knew some way. They knew there was a special star in the sky that served as a sign that a king had been born. And they went in search of that king. Now, that's been explained various ways. Some say, well, it's a convergence of the planets. Every now and then the planets come together and they almost, it makes it look like a special star. Well, there's a supernova. That's a star. You may not even see it, but boy, when it explodes, it makes a big, and then it doesn't last long. It goes away, and every now and then astronomers will spot a supernova. Others say, well, maybe it's a comet coming through. Look at this star. I want to show you what it did. Those explanations don't seem adequate to me. It went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding joy. Sounds like they saw the star. Now let's go find the king. But they're not. The star reappeared. Oh, there's the star. And they were able to follow it. It went before. You know, you can't do that to the stars. And then it stood over where the child was. Well, if you move over, the star will move with you. You can't do that. It's not behaving like a natural star, is it? This is something special that God did. You're going to hear a song on the radio. Beautiful Star of Bethlehem. You'll hear it this time of season of the year. People use it like a Christmas song, okay? That song starts out, guiding the wise men on their way into the place where Jesus lay. Well, it did from Jerusalem to Bethlehem anyway. It guided them that far. But if you listen to the song and pay attention to the lyrics, the attention goes away from that star guiding the wise men to Jesus himself. At the end of the song, the star is Jesus. Jesus is now the star divine. Brighter and brighter he will shine. You know, Jesus is identified as a star in the Bible. I want you to remember, as I look at these passages, I want you to remember the sun is a star. That bright morning star, think of the sun rising. Don't think of a little sometimes we'll call Venus the morning star or the evening star, depending on where it is. But I want you to think of the sun rising, that star. You can think of it this way. People used to use this illustration for the ages of Scripture. God created the beautiful creation and all was bright and wonderful, and man said, and suddenly everything is pitched into darkness. And out of that darkness you begin to see little points of light. They're called the starlight age, the age of the patriarchs. And then God reveals his law to Israel in the words of the prophets, and so you got the moonlight age. And then John the Baptist appears on the scene, said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's the twilight age. And then Jesus comes, and it's daylight, his return. That's the kind of way people have described to illustrate how the Bible unfolds. Look at these passages. Numbers 24:17, we read that there's a star out of Jacob. In Malachi 2 and verse 4, the sun, S-U-N, the Son of Righteousness will arise with healing in his wings. You might think wings there would be the word. You could also say the beams. You ever get out in the sun and the healing of the sunlight, the warm sunlight, healing in his beams or in his wings. 2 Peter 1:19, the light that shineth in a dark place until the day dawn and the day star shall arise in your hearts. The day star, think of the sun. Think of the sun, the day star. Revelation 22 and verse 16. The bright and morning star. That's Jesus. He's the bright and morning star. The lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. Isn't that what we just sang? And then John 1:19. The true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into this world. You talk about Jesus. He's like that star of light that shines forth out of that darkness and leads us to God. Wise men follow that star. Wise men follow Jesus. Now that's the light we have. The spiritual light in a world of darkness. It's Jesus. And so every time we gather, we extend that invitation. Are you ready to follow Jesus? As that bright star, wise men will follow that star. If you're ready to follow Jesus, confess your faith before men and seal that commitment by being baptized into Christ, then you can come forward as we stand and sing the invitations.